The word recession is buzzing louder in 2025 than it has in recent years, and not just among economists. Market watchers, policymakers, and everyday Americans are starting to feel the tremors of a possible economic slowdown. And no, we are not in a recession yet, but several red flags are waving and fast. A big part of the anxiety? Well, trade tensions. US President Donald Trump's renewed tariff policies are escalating a global trade war that analysts say could tip the fragile economy into decline. Even US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is acknowledging the rising uncertainty. At a 4th of April event, Powell said the tariffs are higher than anticipated, higher than almost all forecasters predicted. We just don't know where that comes to rest. Still, nobody can say for sure what's coming. But if you're trying to read the signs, here are the 5 indicators that recession risks are rising in 2025. First up is negative GDP forecasts that are back. Economic growth, or the lack of it, is often the first clue that something's off. The Atlanta Federal Reserve's GDP tracker is currently projecting a minus 2.8% traction for the first quarter of 2025. If that forecast holds, it would mark the first official GDP decline since early 2022. 2 consecutive quarters of shrinking GDP is a classic textbook definition of a recession. So, this is one to watch. Next is consumer confidence. When people stop believing in the economy, they usually stop spending, and that's exactly what's beginning to happen. In March, the Conference Board's expectations index fell to 65.2, well below the recession warning threshold of 80. Meanwhile, the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index kicked off April with a reading of 50.8, just barely above the all-time low of 50 that hit in June 2022. Translation: people are nervous about what's next, and that matters. Sentiment drives behavior, and in an economy that relies heavily on consumer spending, fear alone can slow everything down. After nearly 2 years of consistent growth, consumer spending finally dipped. From December to January, spending fell 0.2% according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is the first monthly drop in almost 2 years. Though it rebounded by 0.4% in February, that kind of volatility isn't reassuring. And why does this matter? Because consumer spending makes up around 70% of the US economy. If people start tightening their wallets, the economy as a whole could suffer. When some of the biggest names in finance start hedging their bets, it's time to pay attention. First off, JP Morgan Chase now puts the odds of a 2025 recession at 60%. Goldman Sachs just bumped its estimate from 35% to 45%, which is a 10-point jump in 1 week. Similarly, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink went even further, telling CNBC, "I think we are very close, if not in, a recession now." Even former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers says the risk is close to 50-50, blaming completely counterproductive economic policies, including tariffs and deep federal cuts from the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. Furthermore, Moody's Analytics chief economist Mark Zandi has also updated his projection, saying recession odds have jumped to 40%, up from 15% at the start of the year. He warned that things are sure to get worse. Trump's tariff policy is adding fuel to an already uncertain economic climate. The global trade war is slowing down business investment and raising the cost of goods, which trickles down to consumers. Add in the federal job cuts from Dodge and mounting layoffs across several sectors, and there's growing concern that the current economic transition may lead to something worse. While unemployment remains relatively low and wages are holding steady, cracks are forming and pressure is building. So, are we in a recession yet? Well, not quite. According to official numbers, the US economy is still growing, and we haven't yet seen the back-to-back quarters of decline that typically signal a recession. The Bureau of Economic Analysis estimates the economy grew at a 1.3% annual rate in Q1 of 2024. But if current trends hold, that resilience could falter. Even Trump didn't rule out a recession during a March Fox News interview, stating there is a period of transition. It takes a little time, but I think it should be great for us. So what's the translation? It means buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride. The US Federal Reserve has been walking a tightrope, adjusting interest rates to control inflation without derailing the economy. In 2022, there were 7 hikes, ending the year at 4.25% to 4.50%. Next year, in 2023, mixed pauses and hikes, ending at 5.25% to 5.50%. Then came 2024, that's last year, where cuts began as inflation cooled. And finally, this year, current range sits at 4.25% to 4.50%, holding steady, but for now. If a recession takes hold, expect the Fed to act, possibly with more rate cuts to try and stimulate the economy. We are not in recession yet, but we are inching closer with negative GDP projections. The US is not in recession yet, but they might be inching closer. With negative GDP projections, falling consumer confidence, and shifting forecasts from Wall Street's biggest players, the signs are hard to ignore.